Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Alex, reading from Book 3 from Allbyon to Britannia, The Last Wizard by Brandy Pearson. And we're on Chapter 7, The Sleeping Wizard. They managed to rescue Sebastian Jones, yay, but didn't manage to get Leah and her gran out of the house. And Sebastian Jones is not in a good state, so let's see what happens next. Let me just adjust this a wee bit. It's better. Okay, Chapter 7, The Sleeping Wizard. The next morning, I woke up on the sofa in our living room. It took me a moment to remember why I was there. It was because there was a wizard asleep in my bed. There was a snuffle of someone asleep, and I realised that Father Joe was asleep in one of the armchairs, his feet up on a stool. We'd arrived at our house at about 6:30 the previous evening. Sebastian was beginning to come round, but was pale and silent. Father Joe and Dad took him into the bathroom to clean him up, but he could scarcely stand. They dressed him in a pair of my dad's pyjamas, though the legs were too short, and put him to bed in my room. Rose went to sit with him. For hours he remained half asleep and half awake. He started to smile when people talked to him, but never said a word. After a while, Rose made him drink some chamomile tea and sang him to sleep. Whether it was a spell or a lullaby was difficult to say. She told us that he could not talk because he was under a spell. I felt very strange. On the one hand, we succeeded in rescuing him from the blacks. The fairies had got them lost in their own back garden, and, Ruth told us, Hecate Black had somehow ended up tied to a rhododendron bush by her own hair. I'd spoken magic spells that had worked, which felt good. On the other hand, we'd left Leah and her gran with the blacks, and they had done something awful to Sebastian, so he could not even speak, which felt bad. We sent out for a Chinese takeaway, and then sat around talking for hours. No one could send me to bed, as I had no bed to go to, which somehow meant no one could send Ruth to bed either. Eventually, Marco left to return his mate's van. Rose was still sitting by Sebastian in my bed as we variously went to bed. The house was quiet. Everyone was asleep, even though it was after 9. I could feel my notebook under my pillow. On a whim, I got up quietly. My dressing gown and slippers were on a chair by the sofa, so I put them on and took my notebook into the kitchen so that I could put on a light without disturbing Father Joe. I poured myself a glass of pineapple juice and sat at the table, flicking through the notebook. I felt that somehow I should be able to help. I crept up the stairs and listened at the foot of my door? What? The door of my room. Then, as quietly as I could, I opened the door. Rose was sitting on my desk chair next to my bed. When she saw me, she beckoned me in. "I thought you might come up here when you woke up," she said quietly. "Come and sit on the bed. He won't wake up. Apart from anything else, he's exhausted. He must have been tied to that chair for days." I crept in I crept in and sat at the bottom of the bed. It was daylight outside, and the curtains were drawn back a little way. Sebastian still looked pale, and was sleeping like a log. "He's not just tired though, is he?" I said. "They've been using his own magic against him, haven't they?" "If you look at him clearly, I think you will see. If I'm honest, I don't want to look at him because it's so upsetting to see him like this." "I know," said Rose gently. "I feel the same. I've known him for 350 years, and I've never seen him like this. I've seen him tired, exhausted, even heartbroken. I've seen him dead drunk, but I've never seen him like this." I took a deep breath and looked at him. He looked so awful, but I kept looking at him like Rose had said. And then I could see. I can't explain it very well, but it was as if I could see words wrap around him, like tangled ball of wool around his head, in his mouth, even wrapped tightly around his heart. I almost cried out. I looked at Rose. "I can see all the tangled words, all the spells." One of the differences between witches' magic and wizards' magic is that wizards make spells in straight lines and witches make spells in curves and dances. These spells are wrong. They've been spoken by someone who doesn't understand magic. They've been spoken with a malice so strong that it has muddled thinking and muddled the spells. "So how are you going to undo them?" I asked. "I can't undo them. Maybe I could tease out a knot here and there. This is wizard's work. But he's the only wizard we've got. What are we going to do?" "We had a wizard's apprentice, a bright lad who's just started his own book, someone bright enough to use some of the spells in his master's book of spells if needed." She tailed off. I took my eyes off Sebastian and realised that she was looking at me. "Me? I'm not a wizard. I'm not his apprentice. Am I?" Suddenly, a terrible thought came to me. Or was it a wonderful thought? I'm still not sure. His book of spells called to you from that little device. You have written spells into a book and used them well. That's what apprentices do. You even knocked over that nasty mob of the blacks. I only wrote out that spell because it looked like fun. I didn't even know I'd memorised it until I shouted it at them. I was so scared they'd catch us. The magic's inside you, Miles. But what should I do? How do I untangle all of this? Rose laughed quietly. I don't know. I'm just a witch. This is wizard stuff. You're a clever lad. You think things through. You're his best hope. Father Joe or your dad or Marco could read the spells in his book, but it would just be leftover magic. That's what had been used by whoever spoken these spells. That's why it's such a mess. You have your own magic. I can see it brewing inside you. I looked down at myself as if I might see the magic brewing in me like tea in a teapot, but I just looked like me. I remembered one of the spells I'd written out and held at my hand and spoke the words quietly. A small ball of light appeared between my hands. At that moment, Sebastian opened his eyes. The light floated towards him. When he saw it, he smiled, a very small smile, and went back to sleep, smiling. I moved my hands in the way the book had shown me, and the light went out. I could see Rose looking at me. I took a deep breath. I'll do my best, I said, but now I need to go to the bathroom and have some breakfast and even get dressed. Good lad, Rose chuckled. By the time I got dressed, everyone was up. It was strange. We had our wizard back, but nothing was completed. Ruth wanted to visit the fairies again to give them a gift. She had some understanding of them, how they thought that was linked with her ability to see them unaided. She thought it was important to keep them on our side. We needed to be very careful, but surprisingly, Rose agreed to go with her. She seemed to finally be getting used to travelling on the tube, or perhaps what had happened yesterday had put it all in perspective. For some reason, Rose was less concerned about Sebastian after her talk with me. She had more faith in me than I had in myself. Rose and Father Joe got Sebastian sitting up in bed, propped up on many extra pillows, and with help he drank some fruit juice. Then, though no one said, Father Joe and Dad helped him to pee into a bottle. Rose then managed to feed him some sweet milky porridge. He looked a little less pale. Mum went in to see him and brushed his hair. Ruth went to the shops and bought little daffodils growing in a yellow bowl and put them on the bedside table. After Joe went home to change his clothes, Rose and Ruth went off to the fairies. After they'd set off, I told Mum and Dad I would sit with Sebastian. I looked at him in the way Rose had showed me, and the tangled spells were still there. Every now and then he would open his eyes and look at me. I hope I detected the small smile. A lot of the time, although he was not asleep, he seemed to drift away somewhere else. I took several deep breaths, fired up my laptop, plugged in the TARDIS flash drive and opened the files. I also had my own notebook with the spells I'd copied out. What was I going to do? At first, I spent too much time thinking that it was my friend lying there, and I started to panic. I gave myself a talking to and decided to treat it like a puzzle. I looked at the tangle of words and started to try and follow one of the threads. I took a pen and pad of paper out of my desk and wrote down the letters that I could see. When I lost the thread, I stopped and looked at what I had written. I recognised some words and began to split up the strings of letters. There were parts of sentences. I rearranged them and began to recognise it as a spell. It wasn't one of the spells I'd copied out, so I started to look through the files on my laptop. It was hard work, not what I thought I'd be doing on my Easter break. However, once I'd set aside how important this was for my friend, I found I was enjoying it. It was solving a puzzle, and I always found that enjoyable. And then I found the spell. About 3/4 of the words of the spell were in the words I had found. For some reason, I copied the spell carefully into my notebook, almost before seeing what the spell was for. It was a spell to silence someone, to take away their speech. It seemed odd considering he had been gagged, but I was certain that this was the correct spell. Then I had to work out how to undo the spell. There was a section at the beginning of the whole book of spells on undoing spells, so I sat and read it through twice, as if it were an exam question. It was a question of somehow speaking the spell backwards and doing the gestures backwards. That was not like playing music or speech backwards. Eventually, I'd written down... Sorry, I scrolled too far. I'd written down what I thought I ought to say and what to do with my hands. So what to do next? I knew what I had to do, But I was terrified of doing it wrong, of making him worse. I could not speak the words without looking at Sebastian, so it became more difficult to treat it like a puzzle. "Sebastian," I said to him, "I think this is right. I'm doing my best. Here goes." He opened his eyes and looked at me. Mum and Dad were both busy downstairs. Father Joe had gone home to do some church stuff. Rose and Ruth had gone out. There was no one to interrupt me. I took a deep breath, spoke the words, and made the gestures. Did he look any different? Had it worked? And then, very quietly, Sebastian croaked, "Well done, Miles. You've given me back my words." "Thanks," I replied lamely. "I'm so relieved that it worked. It's all your spells. The words were mine, but the process and the magic are yours. I can't feel any magic in me now," he said. "Did you know I would take the flash drive?" "I hoped you might." He closed his eyes. "Is there anything you want?" I asked. "I think I want to sleep. It would be nice to sleep with my words back. It makes dreaming so much easier. You know, it wasn't the blacks. It was Brenda Brown. She really hates me." Then he closed his eyes, and immediately, from the way he was breathing, I could tell he had fallen asleep. So they have their wizard back, and the wizard can speak, but we're not even halfway through the story yet, so join me next time to see what happens next.